So remember, they're trying to make sure they don't have any confounding factors that these participants would have other comorbidities that would contribute to basically throwing a monkey wrench into their study, because they're not trying to see what other diseases do for these people. They want to know, okay, you don't have anything except the one that we're trying to study. I love that they did that in this study. Participants were asked to refrain from taking any non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agents for 2 days prior to their blood draw, because they wanted to see where they actually stand. The institutional review boards at the Johns Hopkins University, Brigham and Women's Hospital, and the Harvard School of Public Health all approved the study protocol. Those are 3 institutions that are highly recognized as knowing what they're talking about when it comes to study design. So that's cool. All right, so let's look at the controlled feeding. Participant enrollment began in April of 2008. Feeding and data collection ended in December of 2010. Participants were randomly assigned to one of 8 dietary sequences of the 4 main diets, and they received 100% of their meals from each study center. So in other words, for the duration of this randomized trial, they got all their food provided by the study authors. Study participants underwent an 8-day run-in phase, during which each of the 4 study diets was given for 2 days. Afterwards, participants consumed each diet over a 5-week period, followed by a 2-week washout, during which they ate their self-selected diet. In other words, they don't have to follow the DASH diet. I wonder how many of them hated the protocol they were on in the 5-week period, and they were just like, when I get to that 2 weeks, I'm just going to go binge on McDonald's. And they were probably so frustrated, especially the ones that had the hunger. Calorie targets were determined for each participant based on their body size, their sex, and their physical activity level. Calorie intake was adjusted throughout the trial to keep weight within 2% of their baseline. So that's interesting. They didn't want them gaining weight and they didn't want them losing weight. They had to stay within 2%. Isn't that fascinating? Attendance at the meals was recorded on the weekdays. Participants were required to eat 1 principal meal on site and were observed every time they ate. Can you imagine, like, you're sitting there eating your meal and somebody's just staring, writing notes, staring. Can you imagine they're eating the food and they're just like, ugh, if I have to eat one more bite of this crap, I'm going to puke. Sorry, I'm just imagining the scenario of being watched while you eat. Participants were sent home with the remaining 2 meals and their weekend meals. Every day, participants completed a diary in which they listed their consumption of the protocol and their non-protocol foods. All right, so how did they measure the symptoms that they were measuring in the study? They were asked at the end of the screening and run-in periods and at the end of each of the feeding periods. The questionnaire was similar to that used in previous feeding studies regarding the occurrence of symptoms during the past month, including diarrhea, loose stools, constipation, bloating, nausea, upset stomach, and heartburn. The 4 ordinal options for each symptom. So they had a number assigned to what level of symptom they had for each of these things. If it was 1, it didn't happen. If it was 2, it was only mild. If it was 3, it was moderate. And if it was 4, it was severe. Again, all of that is subjective, but they leave it up to the individual to tell you where they stand. The frequency of the symptoms was not asked. So they didn't want to know how often, how long did it happen. We just want to know, did it happen? And then if it happened, what number do you assign to it? How about the measurement of hunger and diet satisfaction? Participants were asked to rate how hungry they felt and how much they liked the diet regarding the food that they were provided over the past week at the end of each of the feeding periods. Hunger options ranged from 1 to 9, with 1 being not hungry at all and 9 being extremely hungry. Diet satisfaction ranged from 1 to 9, 1 being disliked extremely and 9 being liked extremely. These questions were not completed at baseline. So in other words, they didn't want to know like how happy they were with their chosen diet. They only wanted to know satisfaction and hunger for the intervention diet. All right, statistical analysis. The study population characteristics were evaluated using means and proportions. They evaluated all the effects of the diet on hunger, diet satisfaction, symptoms, compared responses from baseline and each of the 4 intervention diets between each of the intervention, blah, 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 blah. This is a little bit boring, so I'm going to skip over a little bit. Because this study was a randomized crossover trial and missing data were relatively low per intervention group, all of the baseline characteristics should be controlled for inherently, and no additional covariates were adjusted for in the regression models. That's a little bit of research speak. Don't get caught up in that. They're just trying to explain that we did our homework and we tried to make sure that all of the outcomes that we got were indeed what happened. All right, so what were the results? Let's dig into that. A total of 163 participants completed more than 2 of the 4 intervention diets, and they were included in the analysis. For any pair of diets, there were between 135 and 150 participants. Baseline characteristics of the randomized study population are shown in Table 1, which they have a nice little graphic for us there. And overall, the mean age of the participants was 52.1 years old, 52% women, 51% non-Hispanic Black, 56% of the study participants were obese, 26 of them had hypertension but not on medications for it. No differential baseline characteristics were detected between the participants that were included in the analysis and dropouts by diet. Overall, this was interesting, adherence was pretty high to these diets. 96% of them showed up for their in-person requirement to eat the one meal. That's interesting. Participants consumed all of the study foods with no non-study foods consumed. 96% of them did that. Any alcohol consumption was reported on 11% of people. So that's pretty low. Like if you got some boozers in the trial, maybe they would want to, unless they lied, I suppose. They could have lied. But. So let's look at the symptoms. The percentages positive, mild, severe, or moderate for the symptoms at the end of baseline and intervention periods are depicted in figures 1 and 2. So again, they got lots of figures. Figures don't translate over podcasts, so I'm just gonna keep reading the study because they talk about what they found. So the gastrointestinal symptoms comparing baseline and intervention diets also are in another table. Participants reported a decreased symptom of heartburn on all of the intervention diets compared with the baseline. Participants reported increases in diarrhea and loose stools and bloating on all intervention diets compared with their baseline. Lastly, participants reported no differences in constipation, nausea, upset stomach on all of the intervention diets compared with baseline. All right. So let's skip past all of those tables because you can get really caught up in the weeds with that. All right. Symptoms of diarrhea, loose stools, constipation, bloating, and nausea, upset stomach were not significantly different between the higher GI diets and lower GI diets, nor between higher carb diets and lower carb diets. Remember, lower carb means 40-45% of carbs. Heartburn symptoms for the higher carb diets compared with low carb diets showed a slight increase, more heartburn on the high carb diets. Specifically, the higher carb, higher glycemic index diet showed significantly increased heartburn compared with the other diets, which again does not surprise me or any of us. All right. How about hunger? So they used a hunger rating, and again, they show it in a table as to how they found the hunger. Participants felt more hungry on the higher carb, higher glycemic index diet period, and less hungry following the lower carb, lower glycemic diet. Again, not surprising to us, but I'm sure the people that promote the DASH diet are going, whoa, no wonder we couldn't get 4 out of 5 people to do our diet. They're starving. Yeah, newsflash. You could have known that many years ago if you actually did the deep dive like Lawrence Apple and his team here are doing. Higher carb diets compared with lower carb diets showed an increase in hunger individually They showed significantly higher hunger ratings as compared to the lower carb diets. There was no significant difference in hunger between the higher GI diets and the lower GI diets. So when they looked at that, that was interesting. However, the higher carb, higher GI had significantly, or lower, it's hard to keep up with all these little shorthands I'm trying to translate in my head. The lower carb, lower GI had significantly lower hunger ratings than both of the other diets. How about diet satisfaction? Participants liked the high carb, high GI diet more than they did the lower carb, high GI diet. So that's that. And I'm trying to dig into that. And plus they're trying to stay within the template of the DASH diet. The DASH diet is very low in fat. So when you lower carbs and you don't also increase fat, guess what? You're not going to be very satisfied. And so had they done this study and they compared the DASH diet, the very high carb, very high glycemic index, with like a more ketogenic styled type of diet, I think their satisfaction would have been a lot better with bacon, full fat foods, eggs, steak, that kind of thing. That would have made it more desirable. But they're still trying to fit it within the context of the DASH diet, and therefore they weren't very happy when they had to eat less carbs but still have the crappy rest of the diet. Whereas the people that ate the higher carb, at least they're like, woohoo, I'm eating lots of carbs, I'm satisfied, I love that. I'm hungry, I'm bloated, I'm not feeling well. Oh, but I'm happy because I'm satisfied having more carbs. Doesn't make sense, does it? You guys tried the Paleo Valley beef sticks? These beef sticks are 100% grass-fed and grass-finished. And many of the grass-fed beef sticks on the market today are actually finished with grains. They use beef sourced from small domestic farms in the United States. They only use real organic spices to flavor the beef sticks versus all the conventional spices sprayed with pesticides and other natural flavors from GMO. They also ferment the sticks, which creates naturally occurring probiotics, all great for your gut health. And best of all, they taste amazing. Again, they're Paleo Valley, my favorite beef stick on the market today. Go check them out, you guys. PaleoValley.com. Use the coupon code Jimmy at checkout for 15% off your first order. Paleo Valley beef sticks. So let's skip ahead the discussions. This is always where it's fun in a study, looking at the researchers discussing what they found. This study reports the effects of carbohydrate amount and GI on hunger, diet satisfaction, and gastrointestinal symptoms. Compared with the baseline, all DASH-style diets tested in the Omnicarb decreased heartburn symptoms while increasing diarrhea, loose stools, bloating symptoms. Participants recorded increased heartburn symptoms, increased hunger, and increased diet satisfaction on higher carbohydrate diets compared with lower carbohydrate diets. I wonder how many of those people that they had higher hunger, higher heartburn, but then greater satisfaction with the high carb diet. How many of them would keep it up because they were satisfied with the diet, but then they got the heartburn and they got the hunger? I don't know about you, but I'd rather have a diet that is less satisfying, but keeps hunger down, keeps heartburn down, and other cardiometabolic effects. To me, it's just silly. I mean, I suppose just the researchers were just noting, hey, they liked the diet, even though it was making them feel like shit. They liked the diet. Like, I wonder how many of them, if they asked them, would you keep doing this diet? And maybe later in the study they will reveal this, but I wonder how many of them will be like, yeah, I'll keep doing that because, man, I was satisfied in that diet, even though it gave me heartburn and indigestion and bloating and blah. It's fascinating. Participants also reported decreased hunger on the lower carb, lower GI diet compared to the other lower GI diets with the higher carb, and decreased diet satisfaction on higher GI diets compared with lower GI diets. These findings suggest that although a high carbohydrate amount in the DASH diet can increase diet satisfaction, it also decreases satiety and increases heartburn in those adults with obesity and who are overweight.